Let's talk about survivorship bias. It's really interesting when we study how people solve problems, the successful treasure hunters, people who are great at games and they're solving puzzles, they're the ones who are solving the problems in the workplace, all these different environments. We sometimes gravitate toward those people who are really successful. And there's a lot of literature to say that that's good, right? You want to look, there's a whole field of psychology called positive psychology that says that most psychological research in the past always focuses on the people with the struggles and the challenges, but they don't actually look at the people who are really thriving and flourishing. And positive psychology has a lot to offer. So there's much that we can learn from the people who are the winners of the games, the people who are finding success, the people who are solving the problem. So I don't want to take anything away from that. And yet, there is something called survivorship bias, which is a kind of cognitive bias where we love to study the winners, but it really blinds us from the hidden failures. And it doesn't necessarily give us a path to success. Why? Well, I'll explain quickly. One of the reasons is because sometimes people who are successful don't actually know how they're successful. There's sometimes chance and experimentation, and people are just doing some trial and error and other things like that. And yet, they come to believe that they figured it out, and they'd like to attribute it more to sort of a conscious effort, but it doesn't actually always work that way. Imagine, for example, if someone won the lottery and you asked them and you interviewed all the people who won the lottery and you discovered the strategies that they used whenever they would buy a lottery ticket and how they'd pick their numbers and everything like that. Well, those strategies are actually not more successful than the strategies of those who failed because it's a game of chance, right? And yet sometimes people will fall into that trap with survivorship bias. So how do we hold that at bay? How do we find some ways to not get pulled too far into the trap of survivorship bias while still learning from the successes of people who have done something well? Well, first one is count failures. Don't just admire the successes, but learn from and talk to people who failed. One thing that you'll find is if you talk to people who have succeeded and failed at something, you'll find that they might have a lot more in common than you realize. You may see that there is some chance and there are some opportunities beyond their ability. There may be some things that those who failed and succeeded didn't even realize contributed to their successes and failures. So broaden your horizon and don't just look at the people who got the final victory. There may be a lot to learn from the people who came in second place and third place and even 100th place or something like that. The second one is to, I guess I count this. I wrote it down as something separate. Looking at it again, it sounds really similar, but I wrote it down to look for the graveyard, the forgotten attempts, the abandoned projects, the dead clues. When you're talking to people who are successful and are finding problems, ask them about all the things they tried that didn't work. Don't just ask them about the things that they did that got them to that destination. Get a bigger picture of their entire journey, the graveyard of failed attempts. And it's going to give you a bit of perspective. It'll take you out of that kind of fairy tale land where you think that they just sort of sat down and looked at it and figured it out really quickly. It'll give you that bigger story and that fuller picture, help you avoid some of the downsides of survivorship bias. The third one is to imagine what failure would look like. So picture someone who was really successful and then try to imagine, okay, what kinds of things might they do if there were just some small changes or adjustments in their attempts? Which ones of those might have led to some failures? And again, it's going to broaden your horizon. It's going to help you see things a little more fully, get a more complete picture. We can still learn from those who were successful, but we're doing it with a bigger picture. The other one is to question the winner's advice. And this goes back to what I said at the beginning of the video. Just because someone's good at something, just because someone solves a problem, doesn't mean that their explanation as to how they solve the problem and why they solve the problem is correct. They may or may not know all of the things that contributed to their success. There might be some chance, there might have been some guesswork. They might have gotten ideas from someone else. Maybe they were talking to other people who tried something and they failed, and the one who was successful took that failed attempt, tweaked it, maybe even unknowingly, not even documenting how they tweaked it. They maybe even tried what the other person did, and it was just successful. And that's the reality is sometimes especially when you're searching for solutions and you're observing and trying to gain a lot of data. It's really easy to just miss one small detail. And the next person who comes by is doing almost exactly the same thing as the person before, but for one reason or another, they happen to catch that detail or that nuance, or they did it at the right time. The sun was at the right place in the sky for them to see something, and the shadows were a little bit different. And that is something for us to keep in mind, that there is that aspect to our literal and figurative treasure hunting and problem solving and decision making in our lives, and that's okay. And then the fifth one is to try to collect all the data. Whenever you can, keep track of both the wins and the losses of your own when you're trying things. And also if you're talking to others and trying to learn. In some ways, I feel like in this one, I've repeated myself quite a bit. But counting the failures and learning from the failures of others, and realizing that failed attempts maybe have been really close to successful attempts, and you can still learn from it. Learning from the failed attempts of the winners, the ones who are successful, imagining ways that a successful attempt could just be tweaked to become a failure, questioning the winner's advice, realizing that they don't always kind of have the full picture, and then finally try to collect all the data and look at it and see what you can learn from it. You put all these together and you're going to make some pretty good progress avoiding at least some aspects of survivorship bias. But as I said at the beginning, also, we can learn a lot from those who were successful in solving problems, and we want to do that. We just want to make sure we don't take it too far. So I hope you find this interesting. I look forward to your comments.